Hello everyone, I hope you've had a very Merry Christmas. If you're watching this in August, I hope you're having a lovely summer holidays, but I'm filming in January, so I'm going to stay with the Christmas theme. Now, what did you get for Christmas? I myself got some very nice things. I got some socks from my mother, which I desperately need, and a lovely pair of driving shoes for when I go on track from my sister, so thank you guys for that. But maybe you live in a family that give out more luxurious and unusual gift items. And say this festive season you've been gifted a small oil field. What are you going to do with it? Well, here's my suggestion. You might want to pop yourself onto Auto Trader and find one of these. This is a 1992 Mercedes 600 SEL. Now, rightly or wrongly, and you can argue that in the comments section, German cars have built a reputation for quality, luxuriousness, performance, and reliability. In the case of Mercedes, it's cars like this upon which that reputation was built. This, according to many, is basically the last great Mercedes. And what makes it so great? Well, it's great in the very traditional sense that this thing is absolutely enormous. It's huge. I don't know if you can appreciate it from the pictures, but this thing is very, very large indeed. How big it must have felt on the roads 26 years ago, I cannot possibly imagine. You'll know that I love moaning about how big modern cars have got. Well, this thing is enormous. The one good thing for me, of course, is the fact that because it is made up of enormous slab-sided panels, rigging the cameras up this morning was very, very easy. Now I'm going to cut straight to the chase. There's one bit about this car that I think will draw us petrol-heady lot to it more than any other. That's what's under there, because this thing is powered by a 6-litre V12. Mercedes call it the M120. You may know it better as the engine that went in the Pagani Zonda. This car has more or less the same motor that went in the original C12. Remember that when it was called the C12? It's got just over 400 horsepower and 400 pound-foot of torque. Exact figures, well, I could tell you what it had originally, but it probably doesn't have those anymore. And that's mated to this old-school 4-speed automatic gearbox. The idea, of course, is that because the engine is just so effortless in its performance, it can pull those 4 gears with relative ease. Now, I'm currently in the middle of a small town behind a bunch of cyclists, but I'm going to get out to some slightly more open roads in a minute and put that to the test. This car is just filled with amazing features and technology, many of which were firsts for either Mercedes or the car industry in general. Everything in here is electric, right down to the steering column. You have, of course, air conditioning, you've got heated seats, you've got everything you want. You've got dual zone climate control in 1992. That's not bad. All the materials in here are generally of a very high standard, but it does the same thing that my old BMW 5 Series did. It mixes this gorgeous, lovely wood and leather with pretty crappy, cheap plastic switches. However, those switches still work, so it is at least German in the correct sense of the word. Power steering naturally has absolutely no feel whatsoever. Presumably so your driver wouldn't break a sweat when ferrying you from one end of the autobahn to the other. And I suspect that really, of course, is where this car would be at home. Not on these small, narrow British country roads, but on a nice, big German motorway where it will happily cruise up to its 155 mile an hour top speed in complete luxury and calm. Yes, simply prodding the accelerator gently, you get this nice wave of effortless acceleration. This is really what old school cars were all about. Now, you may have seen some clips online of these cars or its V12 relatives that have been fitted with an F1 exhaust or something like that. If you haven't, Google 600 S-Class Mercedes F1 exhaust. They sound pretty bonkers. In this, though, it doesn't. Now, it doesn't, of course, move with something like a 400 horsepower V12. It moves like something that weighs 2 tons. And when you start to get it around the corners, of course, there is absolutely no escaping the fact that it is a big old boat. But it's really quite fun and quite enjoyable. Now, this car is pretty quiet and I can't really hear any rattles or squeaks from it. It's got a nice sunroof up here, which is absolutely lovely, and it's a very unusual thing to find in this type of car these days. You see, sunroofs do not help torsional rigidity, and the great benefit of torsional rigidity beyond handling is improving NVH. This is one of the reasons that things like the Chiron are so proud of the fact they have sky-high torsional rigidity figures, because that can make the car much more luxurious, not just better handling. Now, why on earth would you buy one of these cars? Well, it's not the last word in performance, and of course it isn't the last word in luxury in 2018, but it still feels like a proper, serious old car. It's easy to forget, but this was the car Mercedes used as a base for the original Maybachs. It's a serious piece of engineering, this. And the thing about the car market these days is that an awful lot of classic cars have become just unattainable. They've become silly expensive, and most people just can't possibly hope to ever buy one. These, though, have resisted that. Now, of course, a large part of the reason is going to be the fact that keeping a massive Mercedes V12 going isn't going to be cheap. Filling this car up, and we've just seen fuel prices drop dramatically in this country, would cost you about £120, thanks to the 100-litre fuel tank. If you're watching from America, that's about 23 gallons. And it'll get through it. I looked up some fuel economy figures for this, and the official published fuel economy is 18. That's UK. About 15 US. I suspect the majority of people wouldn't ever get to see that. This would make a really, really fun car just to have at the weekends as just a little slice of old school luxury. It's exactly the sort of thing I could see my mate Laurie having. You see, he's got a nice little get up and a suit from when he does stuff on his train. He's got a little cap and everything, and he looks like a proper driver. And if you're into that kind of scene, this would be a cool car to buy. Might also make quite a funny little car to modify and lower, put a silly exhaust on, and just confuse the hell out of people. Does remind me in some ways of my old 5 Series, because that thing looked like just your granddad's old Beamer, but it sounded like absolute thunder. And this thing really is just that car times 10. If you're wondering how much you can pick one of these up for, well, 4 figures? Sound about good to you? Because it sounds bloody good to me for a car that would have cost an absolute bomb back in the day. And if you're the sort of person that really enjoys hidden treasures in the car world, try and find one of the S70 versions of this, or even rarer, the S73. Those are, as you might have guessed, 7 or 7.3 litre versions of this car. If ever there were a car that signified decadence in a bygone era, this really would be it. The two things it's really missing for me are a car phone, although I'm sure you could get one, and a couple of flags at the front. You see, you could drive this if you were called Lord or Lady or Doctor, but I think if you're going to drive one of these, you should probably start addressing yourself as General. It's got that kind of vibe about it. Unfortunately, this car, or this generation of car, is probably best known to British people for the fact that it was the car in which Princess Diana was tragically killed in 1997, and that is a very, very unfortunate piece of publicity for Mercedes. In conclusion, I believe this car thoroughly deserves its place in Mercedes history as possibly the last proper Merc. This thing cost them so much time and money. It was in development for a decade. They spent $1 billion developing this thing. And unfortunately, when they'd finished with it, they said, we're not doing that again. And it's a shame, because when I think of a Merc, this is what I want. Thank you for watching, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed this brief little look at a very unusual car. Don't forget to comment below, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.